Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to my talk today. One of my favorite things about APLL, and one of the reasons that I'm so sad that we're virtual this time, is catching up with people, meeting new researchers who do work in Papua New Guinea. And so if I hadn't had a chance to say hi yet, or if you don't know me, please feel free to send me a message. I'm always happy to talk to new people. So my talk today discusses work that has been done with in collaboration with the Ende Language Committee and the Limol community, which is pictured right here at the bottom of the slide. Today I'll be discussing 3 research methodologies that I have used to capture breadth and depth in the Ende documentation project. I won't be talking too much about the linguistic structures of Ende, and so if you're interested in that, make sure that you go to the 3 other talks that are being presented at this conference about Ende and other Papuan River languages. Megan Brown's talk on the syntax of Ende was yesterday, and in a short while today, we're going to hear from Catherine Scanlon, who's talking about the historical documentation of the Papuan River family. And then tonight, finally, Catherine Strong is going to be giving the early career plenary, and she'll be discussing sociophonetic variation in Ende. So I hope you can, or have already made it to some of those talks. In my talk today, I have 3 methodologies that I want to share with you that I think have resulted in some excellent data for the Ende language corpus. So first, I'm going to tell you about the origins of this project with the Ende Language Committee and their goals for language development and how these methodologies kind of fit in with those goals. Then I'll briefly describe each of the methods and discuss their application in the Ende context. So in my abstract, I suggested that today I would be talking about, I'll be describing a picture task, the sociolinguistic questionnaire, and the video task. So tonight at the early career plenary, I'll actually be speaking with Catherine on the sociolinguistic questionnaire method. So if you're interested in that, make sure to come to tonight's talk. So instead of the sociolinguistics questionnaire, I'm actually going to tell you about an experimental technology class that I taught in 2018 that also got a lot of really great and interesting data for the corpus. Finally, I will share some of the results that came out of these methods, which included just in general a lot more community participation in the corpus, more data for cross-linguistic comparison, and certainly a greater cultural depth to the language corpus than I would have been able to achieve without these methods. So the Ende language is part of the Papuan River language family with 5 other language varieties, as you can see on this map. The map shows villages in the area which are primarily composed of speakers of one of the Papuan River languages. Of course, this area is highly multilingual. The practice is this. It's a practice of multilingual egalitarianism, and so these boundaries that you see are not linguistic boundaries, but rather just bubbles that include these villages where you find high concentrations of these speakers of people, but you definitely find Papuan River speakers all outside of these bubbles, and you find speakers of other languages inside this little paw print. But you'll see that Ende is primarily spoken in Limol, Malam, and Kinkin, and the number of speakers range somewhere between 600 and 1,000 speakers. The languages are all pretty stable. This work was initiated by the Ende Language Committee in 2007, specifically Warama Kurupel Suwede, Wagiba Gesser, and Tony Tonza Warama. And they formed this committee to establish a writing system for the Ende language and to begin translation of the Bible. I joined the team in 2015 to support the committee's desire to publish a dictionary and several books of short stories for the elementary school in Ende. When I joined, the Ende Language Committee had several stated goals. The first 2 were village-wide literacy in the Ende language and recognition of the Ende language by the Papua New Guinea government so that the language could be used as a medium of instruction in elementary schools. The committee worked towards these goals by producing 7 Ende language books for the school. The Ende alphabet book, which is in the middle center, was submitted to the Department of Education, and that permitted the elementary school to be conducted in both Ende and English because an alphabet had been established for the language. With regards to community literacy, anecdotally, I think that the book that at least got most of the adults excited about reading in Ende or about practicing their literacy was the Ende hymnal, which is here on the right. The Ende hymnal featured 60 well-known original Ende songs that were sung frequently during church services. And so anyone who picked up this book already felt confident that they knew the words because they could sing the songs. It was just a matter of matching the words that were coming out of their mouths to the words in the book. And I felt like it was a very unique and great teaching tool for the community. With regards to the second two goals, the Ende Language Committee has committed to assisting in linguistic research in exchange for community-wide compensation from visiting linguists that would improve the quality of life for Ende villagers. And the methods that I'm discussing today are largely in support of these latter goals. So the three methods that I want to talk about include the family problems picture task, the pluractionality video stimuli, and the technology class. The family problems picture task was developed for the social cognition parallax interview corpus, also known as SCOPIC. So SCOPIC is this open-ended, accessible corpus that contains cross-linguistically matched corpus data with really rich annotations. Basically, this task was run in multiple languages all around the world, and it's a similar task that tries to get really naturalistic data. And the annotations are done in a standardized type of way so that you can make comparisons across these languages. What the task is it's a picture-based narrative puzzle that elicits naturalistic interactions by asking speakers to complete 4 tasks. So here you can see Kakos Baiwa on the right and Gina Kesama on the left participating in the task. There are 16 cards, which you can see laid out in front of them. And each of those cards has a different picture on them. In the first task, 2 speakers go through the deck of pictures and they describe each picture. I tried to find Ende speakers who had not seen the cards before, so generally these were all very new pictures. It involved lots of guessing about what is happening in the pictures and forming reference to characters in other pictures. In the second part of the task, the speakers go through the deck again, and they put the pictures in order to tell a story. And the conversation that is recorded is the 2 speakers talking to one another about, okay, what comes first, what comes next. After the pictures are in order, one of the speakers then tells the story to a naive listener who hasn't been watching this all take place, tells the story using the 3rd-person narrator voice. And then in the final task, the other speaker tells the story again, but this time in the 1st person. So we get, so as you can see, these types of tasks are gathering all kinds of naturalistic data, also narratives both in the 3rd person and in the 1st person. And I ran this task 5 times with 10 speakers. It resulted in 3.5 hours of data. My favorite part was actually when I left the video camera alone. I had just started to record Gina and Kakos, and I realized I was going to run out of batteries. And so I left the camera running and I ran home to get the batteries. And when I came back, Gina and Kakos were sitting there silently. And I was like, oh, shoot, they didn't, I thought they were going to do the task while I was gone. So then they go through the task very slowly and calmly, I presume for my benefit. But later that evening when I watched the videos, I saw that as I ran home, they had gone through the task really quickly, practicing who would say what and when. And so I actually got a really interesting comparison between what is probably a more naturalistic interaction and a more controlled and easier to transcribe interaction later. So the use of this task increased the value of the corpus in 2 major ways. It increased speaker participation in the corpus. 6 out of 10 of the speakers were first-time contributors to the corpus. It also drew a sizable audience, as you can see from these pictures. it garnered more interest in the linguistic data collection in the village. And second, this tool allowed us to investigate a somewhat shocking finding that Volker Gast had observed when he ran this same task with nearby Ende speakers. Ende is the related language just to the west. And when Gast ran the study, he found 0 instances of possessive morphology in the Ende corpus. And I was intrigued. So I looked for possessive marking strategies in these 5 sessions in Ende, and I found 5 different ways of marking possession in Ende. 3 of them were morphological, 1 lexical, and 1 syntactic. And so I'm still curious about the Ende data and how this compares. But the 5 different ways that I found were, first was possessive pronouns, Limol meaning my. The second was morphologically marked possessors. So in this example, Rabo Manong, man, his, thought. The possessor is marked with this possessive clitic bull. The third strategy is the marked possessum, and this only happens with some kinship terms. So in Marada, that means his wife. The da there is his. I also found combinations. So something like Rada boika, Ra meaning husband, is marked with da, meaning her husband. So this third person kinship term, her husband. The bo is this possessive affix that marks Rada as a possessor. And then eka is the word for language. And so what this means is her husband's language. And husband is both marked as the possessor and the possessum. The 5th strategy that was used was word order, where an unmarked possessor preceded an unmarked possessum. And that was the most common strategy for mostly inanimate types of objects. The second experimental method that I used was a video stimuli task, and this was developed in collaboration with Dinnikus Hoken. We designed this task to compare the pluractional and aspectual morphology in Ende and Ende. And what I did was, in Limol, I filmed 47 short clips, video clips, to capture minimally different event situations that targeted pluractional features that we knew were important in Papuan River languages. The types of pluractional features that we contrasted were subject number, 1 person jumping versus 3 people jumping, object number, 1 person picking up 1 coconut versus picking up 3 coconuts, and event number. So scraping a coconut once versus scraping a coconut 3 times, something like this. We also looked at various aspectual features such as inception, duration, and conclusion of events. And so here you can see 2 examples of the video stimuli. There's 3 boys picking up 3 logs in a distributive type fashion, 3 boys picking up 3 logs collectively. You can see that the children, in general, the children were very eager to participate and were excited to be filmed doing various tasks, such as picking up coconuts and sticks and running races. And speakers in Limol, at least, really enjoyed watching the videos and describing them afterwards. So I think it was just a very enjoyable task to participate in. So this resulted in a fair amount of community participation, especially from the children, which I wasn't recording them as often as the adults. But they also participated a lot in the design and the analysis of the task too. The structural findings raised actually more questions than they answered, although we do have some results that are under review right now in linguistic typology. But some things that we did learn from this task, we observed that both languages had multiple pluractional morphemes with flexible functionality. So each of these morphemes variously encoded plural subject, plural object, or plural event, which just depended on the event that was being used. But we're sure there's rhyme and reason to it, but what we learned is that these morphological categories are quite flexible. We also found that even though inception is often lexically marked in these languages, so there's often verbs meaning something like to start singing or to start walking, it's not morphologically marked, at least for the verbs that we tested. Personally, I think that the best data that I got out of this experiment was from recording my Ende-speaking assistant, who was shouting commands at the children so that they would perform the events needed for the stimuli appropriately. And so she would say things like, no, don't jump all around, just jump once up and down, jump once up and down. So even the action of creating these stimulus materials was really informative because I got so many instances of her contrasting what the children were doing wrong with what the children should be doing right. And I think, honestly, the information I got from that was more interesting than from actually having speakers watch the videos and describe them afterwards. So I recommend that method. The final method that I want to share with you today is a technology class that I taught in 2018. I think that this method most closely satisfies the goals that were stated by the Ende Language Committee, first to increase quality of life in Limol and also to contribute to linguistic research. So what this technology class was an 8-week class. We met every day for 2 hours at 4 p.m. And more than 60 students attended the class every day, both from Limol and from surrounding villages. We covered topics such as video recording, microphones, computer skills, still cameras, solar panel usage, basically any type of electronic equipment that I had available to me. I taught people how to use it. And my primary goal for this class was I was leaving all that equipment there, and I wanted people to know how to use it so that when I was gone, people could use it for their own documentation projects and for whatever else they wanted to use it for in the village. And I think that this method also gave people a lot of skills, not only in linguistic documentation practices, but it also enhanced their skills for going to school, for getting jobs in the city. I think there's a lot of ways in which the skills that they learned contributed to a higher quality of life, or at least, people really appreciated the classes, I guess is what I'm saying. The most surprising thing that came out of these classes is that about a week after the classes started, a smaller group of students were discussing this idea that now that they could use the video cameras, they wanted to film a movie. And this resulted in an auto documentary, so a documentary about themselves called Ende-speaking, Light into Ende Tribe. The students in the class came up with the story, the costumes, the actors, the special effects. Each day we would come up with a new scene. We would practice filming the scene, and then the next day we would get the students would get into costume, and we would film the scene. So in this picture, you can see a still from filming one of the scenes. So the resulting video is available on YouTube. It was a very low budget operation. We had just a small PC. We didn't have video editing software. It was just we only had solar panels. But it's 30 minutes long. It has subtitles in English. It's narrated by Tony Warama in Ende, and it tells the story of 4 of the oldest people in the village. When these 4 people were young, these 2 couples, they followed 2 Gogodala missionaries from their home way upriver, attended Bible school, and brought the Christian message back to Limol, along with information about Western medicine, education, various other things. And it's an incredible story. They not only told the story about the journey of these 4 very important members of the Ende community, but they also wanted to show what life was like before these 4 people went to Bible school and what happened after. And so there's this great beautiful scenes of what Ende life was like before Christianity came, before education, before health and medicine. Because the goal of the movie was actually to show the young children in the village what life was like. And so because they were making the movie for themselves, for the community, I believe that everything in the movie is really authentic. It's not made for a foreign audience. And so that's something that I really enjoy about this film. One of so the still that you see on the screen right now, this is comes from one of my favorite scenes. For weeks, the group had been insisting that there be a scene in which an older man teaches some younger men magic, as Ende people used to do. But I was worried about this scene because everyone told me that no one knew how to do magic anymore. And I thought, maybe they would film some men talking and pretend that they were doing magic. But when we actually set up to film the scene, a bunch of old people ran into their houses and brought out all these forgotten magical objects. And in the raw footage, this man performs a magic ceremony that lasts nearly an hour. And it's one of the first times that such a ceremony had been performed in what I assume is decades. So the corpus definitely grew and became a lot more rich culturally. In the process of making the film, several students also interviewed some very important figures in the community, which made the linguistic corpus both much richer from a linguistic perspective. There are more voices, but also from a culturist perspective, they discussed very important sociocultural topics. I'm out of time, but in summary, I'd like to say that implementing these experimental methods, it was helpful in creating more opportunities for community participation, which was a stated goal of the Ende Language Committee. In 2018, we had 101 speakers participate, which was more than double the average of the years before. We also saw more linguist participation. So when I came back to the United States and shared this corpus, I've been able to collaborate with all kinds of different linguists who have found something interesting in this corpus that have mainly come out of these picture task stimuli, the sociolinguistic questionnaire, which I'll talk about tonight, the pluractional video stimuli, and finally the technology class and the movie that came out of that. And so I've utilizing these methods has only brought great things to the Ende language corpus. So thank you. If you have any questions about the resources, or if there's something that you saw that you might want to implement in your own work, definitely feel free to email me or send me a message. I'm happy to share any of my materials or any resources that you might need to learn more about these projects. So thank you very much.